Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have massive news coming out of Russia, Ukraine, and also the Middle East. But by far our biggest piece of news of the day is we're hearing that all restrictions have been lifted off of Ukraine to do deep strikes into mainland Russia, and that is massive news because previously there had been restrictions by the United States preventing Ukraine from striking deep into Russia, and now those have been lifted, so that is very big news. And also on another front, we're hearing that Zelensky is requesting the return of nuclear weapons back to Ukrainian territory in one of the first known instances that he directly asked for those weapons to be returned, and that's also massive news. And we're hearing on many other fronts that Russia's economy is still failing, the interest rate is rising, and they are not doing very good. But we have plenty more news than that, so let's go ahead and jump right into our first article, and this one goes to Military News Ukraine. And we can see right here that apparently Zelensky is demanding nuclear weapons to be returned back to his country once again, and recall that Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons in exchange for the Budapest Memorandum, which gave security guarantees to Ukraine in exchange for giving up their nuclear weapons. But now Zelensky is requesting those weapons back, and Zelensky said, quote unquote, "Give us nuclear weapons and missiles in such quantities that we can stop the Russian Federation, and that the Ukrainian state must defend itself with something if joining the NATO alliance takes decades." So it goes without saying this is a massive request by Zelensky, and honestly it's going to be a tough ask for the United States to actually return nuclear weapons to their country. I'm not saying it's off the table because I don't really know what's going on with the United States foreign policy with Ukraine right now, but it looks like the request is being made in public. Of course, we're hearing it from Zelensky right here. Sadly, I can't show the video of him asking it, but rest assured he did ask that directly on camera, and it looks like to me that maybe this might be taken under consideration, but it's very unclear if this is the case. And once again, this is kind of a controversial issue because not everybody supports Ukraine becoming a nuclear state, and also not everybody supports nuclear proliferation either. So it's not very clear if this is going to go anywhere, but once again, the offer is being put out on the table to return those back to Ukraine. At least Zelensky's asking for it, I should say instead. But there's that. But moving on to our next post, this one goes to War Translated. And while Ukraine may not have nuclear weapons being returned in their country at this exact moment, we are hearing some very good news actually from Defense Express that Ukraine has been allowed to strike deep into Russian territory with Western weapons, and it sounds like the situation regarding restrictions on using Western weapons for strikes on Russian territory has indeed changed for the better, and previously we were completely banned from carrying out such strikes, and now we operate without restrictions, not only in the Kursk region, but also across all of Russia, according to Oleg Katkov, who's the chief editor of Defense Express. He also mentioned at the same time, he explained that Ukraine also has its own systems capable of striking targets at distances up to 2,500 kilometers away. So to say this is a bombshell piece of news, that is an understatement, because previously Ukraine had been restricted of what they fire into mainland Russia and how far they can fire it into that territory. But now, according to Defense Express, it sounds like Ukraine can strike as far as they want into Russia and as often as they want as well. So that does indicate things are probably not going too swell in the background with negotiations, or at least preliminary talks. They must not be going well for the United States to lift these restrictions. So very good news for Ukraine, and they can now strike wherever they need to inside of mainland Russia to take out strategic air bases, also oil refineries and other targets just like that. So very good news indeed. We're hearing here from War Translated. But moving on to our next post, this one goes to Max24. And we've got even more good news for Ukraine in this post right here. We're hearing from Reuters that apparently U.S. shipments of weapons into Ukraine were briefly paused in recent days before fully resuming over the weekend as the United States administration debated its policy toward Kyiv, and apparently the shipments have restarted in full after the White House pulled back on its initial assessment to stop aid to Ukraine. So it sounds like to me, once again, there's still some confusion between humanitarian aid and also military aid. The humanitarian aid was paused. It sounds like that might have resumed as well, but certainly all weapon shipments that were previously scheduled, they are going on fully to Ukraine. So there's been no holdup with that whatsoever, and it's still flowing there as we speak. So all the reports you've heard out there of the weapon shipments being halted is simply baloney. It's not real, and we're hearing right here that this is the case, that weapons are flowing once again. So very good news for Ukraine to see that yet again. But moving on to our next post here, this one goes to the Euromaidan Press. And one country that is not getting good news today, that is the Russian Federation, and we're hearing that Russia's war economy is showing extreme signs of strain, with interest rates soaring over 21%, which is like credit card interest, and also the reserves are plummeting. The British and EU officials believe that Western support for Ukraine must remain unwavering. And that is true, even though the Russian economy is sinking very fast, like the Titanic at this point, we still have to make sure that we're supporting Ukraine all the way. The US cannot back off, Europe cannot back off either. Now is the time to go all in and make sure that Russia, while it's in this very shaky state with its economy, is brought to its knees so that way Putin can be deposed, or the country's forced to end the war inside of Ukraine. So it sounds like the British and EU authorities are doing that, and also the US is also going all in. So that's a good sign, once again, that we are going all in on the situation. But moving on here to this next post here, this one goes to Null Reports. And we've got some more news about the pesky North Koreans who are showing up to fight in Ukraine where they don't even belong. And we're hearing here from Null Reports today that North Korean troops are still fighting in Kursk, according to Ukraine's intel chief Budanov. And Budanov denies the New York Times claims of their withdrawal due to heavy losses. And the War Zone writes that 8,000 DPRK soldiers remain on the front line, even though their activity has decreased. So I must tell you all that there's a little bit of confusion around the North Korean troops, and there's a little bit of discrepancies between these stories here coming out from Budanov, because once again, to reiterate it, Budanov, who's Ukraine's intel chief, is claiming the North Koreans are still fighting in Kursk. But if we move on to our next post here from Null Reports, we're hearing from Andrei Kovalenko, who is the head of Ukraine's Center Against Disinformation. He's saying that there are no confirmed reports on whether North Korean troops will return to assault operations in Kursk, and he's also stated they haven't participated in storming actions for several weeks. So he did not directly say that they've not been withdrawn. He really didn't specify at all where they are, but he just simply said that they've been basically pulled off the assault lines, but he didn't say if they've been withdrawn completely. So a little bit of a conflicting story. And then if we move on to our next post here, which goes to Military News Ukraine, we get yet even another conflicting story from South Korean intelligence. Because the South Koreans are saying that North Korean troops have not been involved in the fighting in Russian Kursk region since mid-January, conflicting with Budanov's report and also conflicting with the other guy's report as well. The South Korean intelligence also said that heavy casualties are one reason for the absence of North Korean troops, adding that efforts are underway to determine the exact cause. So I'm going to have to leave it up to the audience here because I'm at a bit of a loss as to what to think about this. We're hearing three different stories and three different versions. And honestly, if I had to speculate on this, I would say that South Korean intelligence is probably the most accurate on this. They know the North Korean is the best, and it sounds like those North Koreans have not been withdrawn completely, but they're not fully involved in the fighting either. So they're not taking part in assaults, but they've also not been completely withdrawn, according to the South Koreans, at least the way I'm interpreting it. So I'll leave it up to y'all how to interpret that, but that is currently the three different stories we're hearing about the North Korean troops. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, and this one goes to Live Ukraine Map. Because like we always say, the video would not be complete without some videos of explosions from Russian gas plants, and oh boy, the Russians are so full of gas that their gas plants are exploding. And we can see that in Astrakhan, at a gas processing plant, it suspended operations after a UAV attack on the night of February 3rd, which was just last night. So let's take a look at this and see how bad the attack was that caused the plant to shut down. And as you can see right here, there's the plant on fire, and it looks like that drone did a direct hit to the center of the gas processing facility, and it struck the gas and it ignited it. And as you can see right there, it's a massive fireball with a ton of secondary explosions, and Astrakhan is definitely lit up bright on February the 3rd of that night. So not good for the Russians, and they really cannot afford that right now because once again, their economy's in tough shape, and now they're losing more gas plants, which is something they cannot afford. But moving on here to our next post, this one goes to Military News Ukraine. And we're getting some news about some advancements in Ukrainian-made weaponry, because today we've heard that Ukrainian laser technologies are already hitting certain objects at a certain height, according to the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Sugarevsky, and according to him, the time will come when the president, meaning Zelensky, will say that we have our own underwater drone, and Sugarevsky believes that he will basically destroy the Crimean Bridge with that underwater drone. So quite a big claim there, and apparently Ukraine's working on several different technologies, not just the laser technologies, and also they're working on some top secret underwater drone that could take out the piles to the Crimean Bridge and take it down completely. And I know some people are going to be asking in the comments already, is this not just US laser technology that's been given to Ukraine and Ukraine's acting like it's their own? Honestly, I could not tell you that for a fact. We did know that the US had been working with Ukraine to develop a laser system, so I'm not sure if this is simply a deployment of US made laser technology, or maybe it is homegrown Ukrainian laser technology. It sounds like, according to the post here, that the Ukrainians have come up with their own technology based on lasers. So it sounds promising, but only time will tell. But with that, we are now moving on to our next post here, and this one goes to Julian Ropke. And we have a Frontline update for you all, and also some cautious good news from the front line around Pokrovsk, because we're hearing that since the capture of another town near Pokrovsk, Russian advances have been extremely small toward Pokrovsk and other areas in that region, and this indicates severe Russian problems regarding available manpower and also equipment as well. And generally speaking, this is a situation across the front line completely. The Russians are making very small gains, gains. The Ukrainians are also making small gains in various other parts. Largely, though, it's still a stalemate. There's really no progress being made on either side. The Ukrainians are fighting the Russians back pretty good, and the Russians are gaining small little incremental spots here and there. So nothing major to report really, but once again, just a small frontline update to give you all an idea of the context of the situation. But moving on here to our next post, this one goes to Max24. And we received some information here about back-channel negotiations happening between Russia and Ukraine, and this honestly shows you how inept the Russians are at negotiating, and also how obstinate they're being about working with Ukraine whatsoever, because apparently we've heard that according to the post, Ukraine wanted to exchange the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that's currently under Russian control, and also get assurances from the Russians that they will no longer attack their energy infrastructure in exchange for resuming the gas transits through Ukrainian territory from the Russian side. And remember, Ukraine just cut off that Russian gas shipments through their territory just a couple of weeks back, and that's caused tremendous damage to the Russian economy. So Russia outright refused that. They wouldn't even talk about it, showing you how obstinate they are, and they don't even care if the Russian gas shipment basically being cut off is going to ruin their economy. They are simply focused on keeping the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and not giving in to Ukraine whatsoever, just showing you how obstinate they truly are. So that's just a little bit more context as to back-channel negotiations happening in the background. But with that, we're now moving on to our next post here, and this one goes to OSINT Technical, because we got some very cool footage today of a German-supplied IRIS-T SAM system in Ukrainian operation, and it's seen engaging and knocking down Russian air threats. So I thought this was pretty cool to watch. It's a German-made system actually shooting down Russian drones. So let's take a look at it and see the system in action. And sadly, I had to mute the audio because there is some rock music in the background, and I hate I couldn't let you hear the sound of these missiles, but as you can see, there's the German IRIS-T system shooting down Russian drones, and those interceptors are fast as hell from the IRIS-T. Like, those things are quick. And you can see that they're going around in various different areas of Ukraine where they're stationed and taking down these Russian drones. So just more proof to show you these German systems are actually making a big difference when it comes to air defense inside of Ukraine, and they are being put to good use, unlike the Russians who barely have any air defense whatsoever over their territory. But as you can see, there it is in action. But moving on to our next post here, this one's going to go to FITUX News. And we finally have an explanation for why it took so long for U.S. officials to actually approve ATACMS missile strikes inside of Russia. Because we're being told that according to FITUX News, U.S. officials were worried that Russia would target U.S. troops abroad if Ukraine used ATACMS missiles inside of Russia. And as we all know, that did not happen. Russia did not target U.S. troops abroad, and also ATACMS missiles are now being used inside of Russia. So it sounds like we basically withheld them for no reason. It sounded like, honestly, escalation management, which is something that has been proven not to be a very good strategy. And luckily, this is kind of water under the bridge at this point, but just to show you that this was the reasoning behind not allowing ATACMS strikes inside of Russia. And thankfully, this decision has been reversed, and right now they can use them the way they need to. So that's just more explanations for why that was the case. Kind of disappointing to hear, but then again, it's water under the bridge. But moving on here to our next post, this one goes to OSINT Technical. And now let's switch gears just a little bit. We're going to return back to the United States, and specifically between the United States relations with Mexico, because right now we have seen something that we have not seen in ages, actually. And today we've gotten word that a U.S. Air Force Joint Signals Reconnaissance aircraft is currently loitering over the Gulf of California. It's hoovering up signals intelligence from Mexico, and it's one of the first concrete signs of new U.S. military activity within Mexico. And as you can see right here, here is that surveillance plane flying right along the side of Mexico, and it's going right along Sinaloa, and I suspect that they are conducting intels and signals intelligence on these cartel forces which are in Mexico, which currently have vowed to attack Border Patrol in America, and it looks like the United States is not playing around with that anymore, and they're now trying to get some intel and also let the cartels know that they are making their presence known right there along Mexico's border. So very interesting to see, and not a very usual sight whatsoever, and somewhat rare to see that actually in action. But with that, let's move on to our next story here and switch gears one more time. We have some news coming out of Iran today, but I want to preface it with this news story from the Kyiv Independent. It says Zelensky warned a few days back, actually, of Russia's growing alliance with Iran and North Korea, and in an interview with the Associated Press, Volodymyr Zelensky added that these countries are now openly engaged in Russia's war against Ukraine. And that is perfectly true. This new axis of evil here, which is Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China, and there's also a couple of other ones that really aren't big enough to name, this is the new axis of evil, the new axis powers in the world, and right now Iran and North North Korea are basically rogue states. North Korea has nuclear weapons. Iran is on the precipice of developing a nuke. And today we got the disturbing news that unfortunately we had not been wanting to hear, according to our next article here, which goes to Nexta. Because we got word that according to Nexta, Iran is developing nuclear missiles with a range of 3,000 kilometers based on designs given to it by North Korea. That's a very important distinction right there. North Korea gave Iran this nuclear technology, allegedly, according to British intelligence. And according to the information, the missiles developed jointly with North Korea at two facilities in different parts of Iran that are disguised as space satellite launch centers. And the first facility develops warheads, and the second one develops launchers, and both centers are classified and under heavy guard by the Iran military. So taking a look here exactly what this range looks like, here is a map showing you what a 3,000 kilometer circumference looks like from Iran, and this is allegedly where Iran could strike with these new 3,000 kilometer range missiles. They can strike anywhere in the Middle East, including Israel. Also, they can strike into Europe and also strike into Ukraine and even Russia. But as you can see, quite a wide range of strikes that can happen here from these Iranian missiles, which is quite disturbing to see that Iran is developing this so quickly, and now they're being aided by another hostile country, which is North Korea. And I think that alliance is more disturbing than the missiles themselves, because we cannot allow alliances like that to take place and simply sit back and do nothing, because that's very dangerous that those alliances are getting a really strong foothold. But with that, folks, that is actually our last post of the day. So I hope you've enjoyed today's short war video, and if you have, before you go, smack the like button and let us know you enjoyed the video, and also if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as well to be kept up to date with the real-time events from around the world as they happen daily. And also, if you want to support the channel financially, we do have a Patreon page where we post over there quite often these days about behind-the-scenes channel instances and also activities that are quite interesting to see. Go check out our Patreon page. The link is in the description below for that, where you can sign up for a monthly membership and support the channel that way, which is a very big help as we're largely crowdfunded by the viewers, and it's you, the viewers, that make all this possible. But once again, folks, thank you all for watching. We'll see you all tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on our next nightly war news stream. And with that, bye-bye for now.